Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our panel here on hate speech. My name is Katelyn, and I'll be the moderator of this event. This is part of our Datathon and Hackathon. This is a competition that works with students from around the world, including some from Indiana, but also from 8 other states in the United States and 7 or 8 countries around the world. And the aim of this is that we, through manual annotation, then automatic detection, that we get into an automatic detection of biased speech that we see online. This is a big challenge. It's a challenge just to define already what is hate speech. But I hope that our panel here will help us to see how that can look like and what kind of impact that has, even very locally, here at Indiana University, and students, but staff and faculty alike. We have worked on this bias against specific groups. So not hate speech in general. We have worked on biased messages, online messages against Asians, against Black people, against Hispanics and Latinos and Latinas, against Jews and against Muslims. So today we have students from this competition, from these workshops in the audience, but this panel we opened up to a wider audience. So we have many more than just the students here today, and I'm very pleased that I see so many people. And sometimes I'm distracted because I still have to let them people in who are joining us now. So welcome everyone. And most importantly, of course, we have today a great panel of panelists that I will introduce to you in a few minutes, so that we can understand how hate speech really works out here locally, and then also, of course, more regional and national and on a global level even. But before I introduce you to the panel and the panelists, let me say a few words on why we felt so important to have this conversation here. In our research lab, Social Media and Hate at IU's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism, we focus on bias against Jews, but we noticed that there is at times a strong connection to hatred against other groups. White nationalists, for example, talk about a white genocide because they think that there are too many Black people or too many immigrants in the country, and they blame Jews or Jewish cabal for this, for organizing this, and they spread these conspiracy theories in their networks. And that's what we often then see in our research. And we also had some hate incidents here on campus and in town. One of the worst incidents in recent years was a racially motivated knife attack, I think 11 days ago, against an Asian student on a local bus. The New York Times reported about it. Please have a look at the statement of Indiana University's Asian Cultural Center that is linked on the page where you registered. And I don't know about what your thoughts were when you heard about this horrific attack yesterday night, the shooting in California during celebrations on the eve of the Lunar New Year. That should be a celebration of joy, and it might not be a hate crime, but just even the fact that we consider that it could be hate crime shows where we are at, and at least pauses me to give it some thought. That we need to discuss these sentiments that are out there. Some people use that to attack people. In any case, the regional, national, and global events show that it's important to have this conversation, about hate speech, what is it, and how does it affect on people. We're very happy that many organizations at IU have supported us in doing this Datas and Hackathon competition on hate speech, from IU research to institutes, to cultural centers, to students organizations. And the list is long, so I just want to share briefly this one page. Hope you can see it, have a short look at it. It's too long that we mention all the names, but we're happy that so many organizations really signed up for that and think that this is an important thing to do. But now to our panel. So we have 4 panelists today. I'm very happy that you joined us for this conversation. First, let me introduce you to DJ Askew. Some of you might know her from an annual event that she does, unifying the culture for local Black high school students, leaders. And she works also, is affiliated with the Neil Marshall Black Cultural Center here at IU. And then we have Elisha Breton. He is a Jewish student doing a master's here and has worked with me on research about anti-Semitism and has been in contact with hundreds of Jewish students, and for many of them a first contact person when there were hate incidents. Then there is Lillian Casillas. She's the director of the Casa Latino Cultural Center. And we have Katelyn Wo, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from the Asian Culture Center here at Indiana University. And please, they have very interesting bios. Go to the webpage where you registered and look at the beautiful work that they've been doing. Without further ado, let's go to our discussion. So we'll have a short presentation from our panelists, then we have a short discussion among us, and then you get a chance to also jump into the conversation and ask some questions. Maybe first in the chat then, and then I can call on you to ask your question. Let's start with DJ. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the work that you do at the or that the Neil Marshall Black Culture Center is doing, and how that has played out in recent years in students' life, what the impact maybe was. Yes, what are the experiences there?
Yes, hello everyone. So I am also a PhD student that is in higher ed. So really at the Neil Marshall it overall just really provides a really safe space for Black students, but you also don't have to be Black to go there, that it is open for everyone, but it is also a space that is really for Black students to really just feel safe, because since IU is only, I think, 4.8% Black, so which is very, very small group of us here. And really some of the work that I have done just this fall is to plan a high school trip where I had Black student leaders come, that they came from the local high schools to just really see how IU is, and just to know that they will have a space here. So they saw performances that were by the African Dance Company. They saw performances by the Black and Brown Theater Troupe. They also saw a student panel. They toured the center, and they also had lunch. So it was just a space where students saw that they were safe. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Elisha, maybe you can go next and tell us about your experiences. We now have recently a Jewish Cultural Center on campus that is being established, but maybe from your personal experiences here in the last 2 years, almost 2 years that you've been here.
Sure. So I primarily work as a TA here at IU. For the last 2 years, I TA'd for Dr. Cakelly's Anti-Semitism and White Supremacy on Social Media course. And more recently, I've been TAing for Jewish music. One thing that I've found is that as microaggressions and as racism and anti-Semitism go up, we see that there's an uptick in social media at ISCA, doing our annotation work, but also hearing from students. The more they feel that racism or hate speech is directed at them, the more comfortable they feel talking about it. And as a TA, as someone who they feel comfortable talking to a lot of the time when they have questions, I was privy to the fact that more and more students of all sorts of backgrounds were coming up to me and letting me know that different things were happening to them, to their friends, in the dorms, on campus, in town. In the last 2 years, we've had a number of particularly heinous offenses towards the Jewish community that I can speak towards. Something that's happened in twice or 3 times in the last 2 years have been the removal of mezuzot, which are traditional Jewish scrolls placed on the doorframe. Last year, from the same house or apartment, the same mezuzah was removed and burned. And then just a couple days ago, there was another incident where a mezuzah was taken off someone's doorpost. These are just small incidents in the grand scheme of things. There have been signs that talk about Holocaust denial and swastikas put up in town. And denial of the Holocaust is more than just an anti-Semitic issue. It starts to bleed into white supremacy and overall racism towards all the minorities, because you're espousing a rhetoric and an ideology that hates on minorities and hates on people of color and people of different ethnic backgrounds. So all in all, what I'm saying is issues like this seem to be on a rise in Bloomington. It seems to be like more and more things are happening. More and more people are comfortable sharing hate speech, which means that more and more students are on the receiving end of it. At ISCA, while we might be a research institute, given the fact that both Dr. Cakelly and myself and Dr. Rosenfeld are all public-facing professors to one degree or another, a lot of people come up to talk to us, and it has made ISCA not necessarily a first response group to anti-Semitism, but it allows us a lot of leeway in understanding where and how these events are happening and taking place, and how to best deal with them within the administration.
Thank you. Lillian, could you go next, please?
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Lillian Casillas. I'm the director of Casa, the Latino Cultural Center, which is one of the 6 cultural centers here on campus. I also, just real quick, the other hat that I wear, I am a board member of El Centro Comunal, which is a nonprofit here in the community that focuses on helping immigrant, recent arrivals, limited English speakers, low-income folks in our community. So in a way, I get a chance to not only interact with those who are Latino, Latina, Latinx here in the campus, but also those that are not, so there's different kinds of social backgrounds, academic, educational, so financial, and so on and so forth. What I have seen, I've been in this job for 28 years, we've always had hate speech, evil speech, whatever words you want to call it, and actions happening. A lot of it, what we see, of course, is your typical, and this is not just unique to the community that I work with, but things when you're walking down the street, somebody yells at something, or like I've even had it, I am someone who is overweight. I've had people say things to me, when you try to get in the bus and try to squeeze in and stuff, and you say, excuse me, and they say fat ass. Excuse my language. So there's a lot of things in which people somehow feel comfortable picking on you or saying things to you. For as long as I've been here too, we've struggled with the various groups who have done flyers that post things on different cars, very hateful messages to a variety of people, because hate speech is not just the verbal, it's the writing as well. And then here at the center, we've had everything from kind of regularly. I mean, even last fall, where folks chalk things right in the house, on the sidewalk of the house, in the driveway up to the house, on the side of the house, in which everything from go back, to your country, build walls, and some other things that are a little bit more hateful. And I think one thing that I would like for folks to know is that, it's really interesting because for people and how that impacts them, it does impact us psychologically, emotionally, physically. I mean, people have said that it hurts them, their stomach hurts. So there's an impact that occurs, but in some ways too, it's almost become normalized. And when you especially look at reporting, I think that a lot of these things are underreported across the board. Again, not just with the community that I work with. And so, and part of it I see as that because, unfortunately, I've seen it even myself. Somebody yells at something as I'm walking down the street and you say, dummies or something like that. And, and just kind of think, but it does not then take away from the fact that it does have an impact. So I think that's something else for really think about, and how that normalization, for lack of a better word, does still have, how does that result in how we see it, how we react to it, how we address, what we see as hate crimes or hate speech specifically.
Thank you. Katelyn? Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katelyn Wo. I am a student assistant at the Asian Culture Center. And I also work a lot with student groups. So I'm on the board for the Asian American Association. I am a student here and an undergrad student. So I feel like I've gotten a lot of the student perspective for how Asians are faced with discrimination and racism on IU's campus. Unfortunately, our director could not be here today, but hopefully I can kind of do her justice. But basically, like the Asian Culture Center just provides a safe space for Asian American and Pacific Islander students on campus. We have a lot of programming, advocacy programming. We do like a Retracing Our Roots retreat every year for Asian students about identity. We have like monthly advocacy events, language tutoring, all kinds of things. I think something that is kind of a misconception is that a lot of our programming is actually mostly attended by students that aren't Asian American. So it really is open to everybody. It's like 70% of people that attend our events are non-Asian. So it's open to all. We work with a lot of student groups on campus and provide like CAPS counseling for Asian students that's particularly like culturally competent to their experiences and their cultures, which I think is one of the most important things that we do here, especially like following events like we saw last Wednesday, which was the stabbing of the Asian student on a Bloomington bus. A lot of that ties into a lot of the stereotypes that people have of Asians and Asian Americans. We talked at length about like being a perpetual foreigner on this campus, always feeling like we're being targeted with racial comments and hate speech on IU's campus, also off of campus. I know like personally, a lot of that I've heard from people and also experienced has been like kind of just people not really understanding the weight of their comments, saying things about how people like group Asian students together. I know I've had many professors that just like are not able to tell me and another Asian student apart. I think that has always been something that has been like normalized in my life, but I think it was very disappointing to me to see that continuing into college. I think for a lot of other Asian students, they have like just had comments thrown at them on the street. I know I've been like in restaurants where people are making fun of like the workers' accents. You see a lot of that, especially going out into the Bloomington community. And I think that is something that has really like kind of hit hard for me. But as Lillian said, it is something that has become really normalized and is underreported, especially like when something like that happens to an Asian student on the street. you're never going to see that person again. You can't identify them. It's hard for our Asian students to report that and feel like they're really getting something out of that. So I think that's a really big issue that we're facing right now. Yeah, and I think another really big piece of that is like Asians always being seen like as a model minority. So we're really like always kind of seen as this group that is more privileged and more, I guess, separated from other minority groups, which like, as we've seen, doesn't really take away from the amount of hate that we're receiving abroad. I know today I actually woke up to the news about the shooting in LA where 10 people were killed after a Lunar New Year event, like we were talking about before. So I think it's just a reminder that like even here at home and also abroad, not even abroad, in the States, we're just facing a lot of hatred. And I think that definitely connects to online too. I think we saw it a lot, like with the stabbing, getting a lot of comments on the pages when they were posting about the information about IU and also just about Asian students in general. So I think it's definitely just something that we keep getting reminded of after things like this happen. So.
Yes, thank you, Katelyn. You mentioned a lot of these things. I want to go into this next round to see what kind of specific stereotypes do we face then in these different communities. So I think there's some overlap sometimes, and sometimes they're very specific. And of course, as Lillian said, all that hurts often very deeply, and sometimes it gets even physical. So you mentioned, for example, this model minority thing, or thinking there is some kind of special privilege even. Jewish students also face this kind of idea of that they would be privileged, all of them, and that is maybe not something that other minorities face, but they face different. So I would like to go into what kind of hate speech, and then we can also speak about what is then the connection between hate speech that we can see online and that we can detect maybe in some ways online, and then aggressions that we face physically in many ways. So let's do a round maybe on what kind of, on your community, what are stereotypes that hurt also, you know, that sometimes people are not even aware of, you know, when they mention some things. But this is still then a bias, a stereotype that comes up. So maybe we do another round, maybe in the same order, so that we can do that. If you would like to start, JJ, that would be great.
Yeah, so I forgot to really mention some of the other sides to the work that I do. I just more so focus on the like positive side of in the like first round, because I also think that it is important to also like show that there are things that are being done, and that, you know, there are people that are passionate and, you know, that are also trying. But also to being a Black person just in like the US just period is difficult. And I'm gonna be fully transparent. I'm gonna be fully honest with y'all. I will not sugarcoat anything. So I would say that I feel like just my experiences as a Black woman is just loaded, because I am dealing with intersections of race, but also gender. So I feel like that just the stereotypes that are normally put on my community, but just also me, is that my like intellect and also that my competence are always questioned. That when I'm in mostly white spaces, it's always weird questions about, how am I here? Why am I here? Well, I'm here because I filled out the same application as everyone else. I'm here because I'm qualified to be here, right? So that's some of the things I've dealt with. So I will talk about a like specific instance that I have dealt with. So I work under a grant that is in the School of Ed. And I have a supervisor there that is known for being a racist, and that where that whole center actually underwent a really, really big investigation because he was calling students slaves, nigger, that these students are stupid. He was saying Black students are stupid, and still this person is hired. He's still there. There has been no punishment, and he's leading projects that are on diversity, but this is how he treats the students. And I have had instances too that where, dealing with this person has literally caused me panic attacks, and it has physically harmed my body to where I wasn't able to sleep, to where when I was in meetings with this person, I was shaking. So this like hate speech is not only just it's not only just having your feelings hurt, but it also manifests up in other areas of your body, and it causes you to be very, very hyper vigilant. And I can give just one more example is that I am the only Black person that is like on his team, because it's a team of 6 grad students. And he has everyone else on his new grant except me. Of course, I'm the only like Black girl. And just whenever he talks to me, I'm spoken to as if I'm not a human being. I'm spoken to as if I am some type of animal, and that I am not smart, as in that this person will literally talk very slow to me. So he will be like, Deja, do you understand? Like he will speak to me like that. And yeah, and just and also hate speech isn't just saying the words and the slurs, it's also exclusion from different conversations. It is exclusion from different resources. It is exclusion from different spaces. That it is, so I'm gonna put all of the white students up on this grant, but Deja will have to like figure it out. Like that is also hate speech. So it's not always overt, that there are times that where it is very subtle, and that where little things are said, little things are done that are literally causing harm to others.
Thank you for sharing this. Yes. Let's go in then. I think Elisha, if you could give us some examples, maybe what kind of stereotypes there are and what students have been facing.
Sure. One of the big ones that we've seen both online and in town, really, and on the campus is getting back into the question of the reality of the Holocaust. We have a lot of people questioning the number 6 million, where the gas chambers, all of these questions that, kind of should have been put to bed a while ago, seem to be popping up. This is pretty common. It goes with the ebb and flow of politics, as there are political and economic issues that come up. Anti-Semitism tends to pop its head up. So these are part of what we're seeing. One of the other big stereotypes that I think affects a lot of Jews who might be white passing or not as visibly Jewish is the fact that people often stereotype Jews as rich and white. And there's not really anything to do about that. I have a lot of friends who have positions on anti-Semitism boards or even Jewish student leaders, and they tell me all the time about how they're not taken seriously in diversity meetings, about how people kind of scoff at them for being, rich white kids, and they don't really have a platform by which to say, hey, that's not correct. I'm Jewish. I come from, a lot of the same lower middle class backgrounds as some of the other minority students. And I'd like to be treated with some modicum of respect also. But there isn't really a place for them to be saying that. And a lot of the times it gets brushed off because it's not taken as seriously as some of the other anti-Semitic tropes that get pushed around. And I think a lot of the other panelists here can speak to this. COVID exacerbated racism. I mean, to a place that we maybe have never seen before. Asians being blamed for COVID, Jews being blamed for COVID, other minorities being blamed for COVID. You know, you also had the emergence of these other stereotypes about Jewish space lasers and Jews controlling the weather. These are so crazy that oftentimes there's no explanation for them. How do we explain that the Jews don't control the weather? No one controls the weather. I'm sorry, like if people aren't catching on to this, it's just at this point it's quite hard to explain. I do think the answer to it is education, but where do you start? Where do you start with someone who believes that the Jews are controlling when the rain and snow falls, or when it's hot and when it's cold? These are thousands of years old stereotypes that haven't left society. They've just changed in one way or another and evolved. But we're seeing them in town. I had an Uber driver who made a comment about how all Jews are rich, and I had a sign posted at the front of my apartment complex that said the Holocaust was an anti-white lie. So I think my closing statement on this will be that COVID really exacerbated problems, and now a lot of us leaders in different communities are really struggling to deal with how to combat that misinformation and miseducation when people are so open to accepting it.
For us within the Latinx community, we have everything from that has been shared by others, is that we're all foreigners too. You know, if they find out you're Mexican or anywhere within the Latin American Latina background, right away, even when they ask you where you're from, I may be from Gary, Indiana, but no, in their heads, there's always the expectation I'm going to respond to some kind of foreign country. I get folks from the community, especially some of the immigrants, that tell me that often because they have an accent, they're somehow questioned their intellect. You know, I have one person who always says, just because I have an accent doesn't mean I can't think, you know. The status, we're all undocumented, we're all Mexican, you know, it's like very narrow. We don't speak English, you know, it's very narrowed as to what they made this very diverse population into. I think too that the challenge is there's the intersectionality. You know, I am a light-skinned Mexican, but we also have very dark-skinned Mexicans. I mean, we have very ways in which we look. So sometimes depending what you look, there are also things that get called out at, or you get interpreted as, or stereotyped as. So sometimes it's very difficult to say it's just this. A lot of it depends on if, you know, who you are, what you look like, what your setting is, and what have you. The other thing I think I want to mention too about hate speech, you know, there's not just the localized, you know, when you have previous presidents who say things, when you have, politicians in general, radio commentary people that are very much in the limelight, you know, calling us invaders or cockroaches or rapists or what have you, that also has an impact. So it's not just what you hear locally, or the things that are being chalked on the floor, or the messages yelled at you, or the teacher that says something to you, but it's also the things. So you're being bombarded in so many different levels and by so many things that does, you know, weigh on you. And that also has a psychological impact, emotional impact. And the one thing that was really interesting yesterday, we met with the Latino Cultural Centers, Latino Cultural Centers from Purdue and Champaign-Urbana. We meet every year to share, to talk, to see how, you know, our experiences, and create alliances and coalitions across the board. And what was really interesting is that, you know, a lot of what we see, you know, of course, we're seeing there, and that it's very difficult to think about, is that where the students themselves are saying, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I am only impacted with this one incident that happens, but some of them live it every day. You know, here at the center, we have to have floodlights installed around the center, because at night, a lot of my staff was afraid when they were leaving. You know, so some people every day walk in it. Again, is that normalization? And that was something that I think was really interesting to hear from the students as part of the discussions that we were doing at the culture centers, not only with our staff, as student staff and our professional staff, but what we were hearing across the board.
Yeah, I definitely think for the Asian community, the sentiments are very similar. I feel like, as Elijah said, COVID has definitely perpetuated a lot of the stereotypes that we hold about Asians, particularly foreignness, and this kind of always assuming that someone, either an Asian student, Asian person, either cannot speak English fluently, or like has an accent, or isn't from the United States. I know like the number of times that Asian students, or like that I've received the question where it's like, where are you from? Oh, well, I'm from Kentucky. But like, no, actually, like they're asking about your family and your ethnicity. And I think that foreignness has led to a lot of, and of course, things that have happened, a lot of fear within the Asian community after COVID, feeling targeted, feeling this general distrust of the population of Asians in particular. And I think that has definitely connected with a lot of students on campus as well, just like people being fearful of just riding on public transportation, walking around campus at night, leaving in the Asian Culture Center when it's late. I think a lot of those have definitely, like, at least in the last couple of years, been exacerbated a lot. I think since the Asian community is so diverse, I mean, Asian American is this gigantic term that encompasses so many groups. I think it definitely, the stereotypes tend to fluctuate, but like for a lot of like South Asian, Southeast Asian nationalities, there's, I guess, like a lot of stereotypes about them not being as successful as other Asian groups. And also like when you look abroad, like seeing these nations as like less like industrialized, as like more East Asian countries, which I think is a huge misconception. And then also there's just a lot of stereotypes about like women, Asian women and Asian men. Like Asian women often get fetishized a lot and are seen as like a submissive group that like isn't like capable of speaking their mind and like speaking out. A lot of the times Asian women, I feel, are like often spoken over very often, like in when you look at like, at least on campus for like leadership groups and things like that, often they're very much like brushed aside. And then I think a lot of Asian men growing up are seen as this like not as masculine group, like they're often like guess emasculated, I guess is the right word, and like not seen like they can perform as well at sports and things like that. And I think there's a lot of like hate speech surrounding like Asian athletes like on campus. I've seen that a lot, people really like not thinking that they measure up to their I guess counterparts on different athletic teams. Yeah, I feel like definitely like Asian students on campus face a lot of these, and I already talked about model minority myth, but that's definitely something that is really significant, especially for like academic performance, and like always assuming that Asian students are like good at math and science and don't I guess belong in spaces that are more like arts related and like music related and things like that, which I think is definitely like a very harmful stereotype to a lot of Asian students on campus.
Thank you for sharing this, and also for bringing up that this is often has a gender dimension to it. Many of the stereotypes are then they work differently with different genders, and that is another dimension that we hadn't talked about before. I want to mention just one group that is unfortunately not present. That couldn't be a representative of the Muslim Student Association here with us today, but there is also a relatively small minority of Muslim students here, and they face a lot of stereotype, at least what we see on our social media observations, saying that all Muslims are terrorists, or that Muslim men hate women, or these kind of things. So there, if somebody wants to speak from their experiences, please raise your hand up, and maybe we can give you also a few minutes to speak about that, if there's somebody who would like to talk more about this. But one thing I want to do one more round about more positive approach, because I know that many of you have been working on, and that is also what these cultural centers often do, have a more positive approach. So I know that Deja, you have worked on joy a lot. So maybe we can do around there what the significance of that is. And of course, I think what I was very useful, I think to be reminded of, I don't know who of you brought this up, but saying, I think it was Katelyn saying, well, these groups, I mean, Jews or Black people or Asians, and there's so much diversity within these groups, within all of these groups, you know, and they do not necessarily like each other all the time, you know. This is also one thing. And so I mean, we see that even, well, there's a long debate about this, but let's go into one round because we are a little bit short of time. We want to take some questions in from the audience as well. So maybe a little statement about what like positive approaches you have been doing, what you think is why that's useful. And maybe we'll start with Deja first. Deja first, thank you.
Yeah, so I am a doctoral student. So one of the ways that I have really been trying to make positive changes is to really like change the narrative, because there are a lot of like stereotypes that, you know, basically Black folks are always angry, that we are like never happy, and just like all those other things, when that's not true. So the way that I have been trying to really like counter that narrative is to really do it through my research by really highlighting the Black voice. And because I feel like at times that just in a lot of research overall, it comes from that kind of colonized view that where only white dominant scholars are really being highlighted. So the way that I'm kind of approaching that is to, you know, really highlight the student voice. So I'm actually working on a couple of studies now that where I am doing that. And also too, that biggest thing was just like really the high school trip that where I had the students come on campus and really just see IU does have a Black space that is for them. And really just to close out is that I just personally feel that we talk about diversity, we talk about anti-racism and just all these anti-things, but it is great to talk about it, but I think it's good to always have an action plan that really follows it too, because all this talking is great, but we need people that are going to do that. We need to break down the system, that we need to really address it and really make a change. So that is where my strengths are.
Thank you.
I would say that on a good note, we have, at least in the Bloomington Jewish community, we have record number of students coming out to understand that they have a community that supports them. For the high holidays last year, we had upwards of 900 students come out, which is really incredible. It's a lot of students. We had to move from the local Chabad house to a nearby hotel to accommodate all of the students that we had. Obviously, that comes with the accompanying security risks and the possible threat of some sort of violence towards us, because there's a history of shootings synagogues and shootings in synagogues. And, you know, that's always a scary issue. But the fact that there were so many students who wanted to come out, despite it being a very traditional, very religious service, there were a lot of students who just came to see their community and see what was going on and have a taste of home for a little bit and just be with somewhat like-minded individuals, same religion, maybe same ideas. Obviously at ISCA, we have, because of all of the posting that we have been doing about all the events, the hate speech and the other events that are happening against students, you know, we've been posting more, we have a bigger following, more people are reading our work, and our work is, and our publications are being spread out more. So that's obviously a good thing that has come out of several very bad situations. I also think, kind of like what Deja said, we kind of leading up to the action plan, having more panels like these where more groups come together to talk about what's going on in their community. It gives other communities kind of entree to what's going on outside of what they're seeing, and it lets us talk about those action plans that Deja was talking about, which I also think are really important, because we do a lot of talking and sometimes maybe not enough action.
I think for us, of course, it was mentioned earlier, education is key. I mean, you try and test the net, and hopefully, you capture folks to let them know what's going on. I mean, events like here today, where it provides the opportunity to share that some of these things are still alive and well, because there are those deniers saying, oh, that's back in the 50s or 60s, but no, that things are still alive and well today. So I think creating, one of the things we try to do, not only through La Casa, but through the nonprofit group that I with, is these educational opportunities. So that's for the public. The other part is that several of us really try to work to make sure that we are in the right places where decisions are being made. We have some successes, some we're still working at it, but to be at the table to be part of those folks that can cause change, can try to address things institutionalized or systemically. So I think that's very important too, that we have that representation across the board. And then the third part is that internally, it's taking care of our own, in the sense is, for example, here at La Casa, we have 3 different groups that focus. All of our programming is open to everybody, except for these 3 groups. One is a support group specifically for Latinas. One is a support for our LGBT, the Latinx community, and one's for our men. And that is an opportunity to create that safe space for them to really talk about what's happening in the world, whether it's validation, connection to resources. So it's how do you support and create that community with that healing, that what is needed to continue. So I think those are things that we try to do to make sure that we're, at the lack of better words, attacking this from different areas. Education, everybody needs to understand what's happening in the world. Second is, how do we put ourselves in those places that we can be catalysts for change? And third is, how do we heal? How do we take care of each other?
Yeah, I would say for us, a lot of it is trying to create programming that highlights the Asian community. I feel like, since it is the group that sometimes is seen as a model minority, it's not as outspoken. I think for us, it's so important that we highlight. We've had Asian authors come in to speak on campus, Asian artists, just trying to create a community of intersectionality that puts Asian people, puts Asian education, I think, as a priority. And that's reaching out to different groups around campus and making sure that we create events that are focused on education and spreading kind of a more positive sentiment around campus. And I think partially how we do that, we have our film festival every year. So that's Asian short films. We have lots of speakers coming in onto campus, different artists, things like that. And I think another really big part of what we do is supporting student groups. So we have Asian American Association. We have we have Filipino Student Association, Pacific Islander Student Association, so many student groups that represent different Asian groups on campus. So supporting them, helping give them resources and space to create community. I think a lot of our Asian students say that places that they feel most welcome on campus are within these student groups and also in our center. So trying to create spaces at IU where Asian students feel comfortable and feel safe, I think is a really big priority for the Asian Culture Center. And then, of course, creating this education piece that is also really important.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, this is apparently more and more needed. It would be great if that wouldn't be needed, if everybody would feel safe everywhere, but this is not the case. So, and I think this is one of the first attempts, at least I have seen here at IU, that we try to bring these conversations together, because we have done a lot of events on anti-Semitism, regular events, by the way. We have a great webinar series that I know some of you are following on anti-Semitism. But to bring different communities together in conversation to see how some of the stereotypes play out against some different minorities, where parallels. This is not done so often, so I'm very grateful that we could do this here together. We'd only have 10 minutes left, and there I think are some very interesting questions in the chat, and I will just read them out, and then you can respond, you panelists, whatever question you want to respond to. So one is about the administration. So how has the administration responded to all of that? Are you happy with the responses? Do you want to say that? Are you feel comfortable saying that? And then how have you highlighted these problems with surrounding faith communities? Have they been supportive? And one question was already answered here. So IU doesn't have a Bloomington campus with students who call for another intifada. But then the last question that's related to the first, how does IU in general uses its power and authority to stop hate speech and discrimination? So maybe you want to respond from your experiences, part of it, some of it. Just go ahead. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll jump in with some of that. First and foremost, I think regarding the faith community, that's one thing I've seen in Bloomington that has been very positive. Everything from, for example, when we were trying to do the, it just escaped me, where those safe havens for undocumented folks, many of the folks in the community said, you know, we will be one of those safe havens. There's a specific word and I'm losing it right now, you know, in which they would protect any of the undocumented that potentially would be sought out or what have you. Thank you, sanctuaries. Yes, thank you. So there has been, and there are still, you know, if need be, places that have opened they've also allowed places for folks to get together and do trainings like Know Your Rights, especially for those who are undocumented. And then also, for example, there was support for the refugee and asylums. I know there are folks here that have stepped up and helped provide support or lend a hand when needed, everything from providing materials to interpreting. There is also a lawyer in town, Christy Pop, she did immigration, who started a justice group that basically consists of folks from different religious groups. Also kind of helped coordinate with Jane Walter to lend support in whatever needed. So there has been folks who stepped up and have helped with that. Regarding the institution, I think that's a mixed bag. Yes, there are things that have been done, but I would say one of the things that can be challenging is that the lack of reporting. Sometimes it's very difficult, even with students, when we are trying to tell them, even if you want nothing to happen, often, as long as we know that 10 reports have been against or 3 reports against a person, folks can answer to it. There are some things that are part of the books that says what IU will accept or not accept, or whoever will accept and not accept, but there's a mixed bag on that, on how feelings, whether how effective they are, the response rate, and then how also people feel that, in the sense of reporting things, what for? Nothing will really happen of it. Some people even go as far as say that, it's a joke. So there's a mixed feeling as to what things are in place, how effective they are, what results will have across the board, depending on who you talk to. I don't know if that actually answers the question, but that's something I think has been from my experience of what I see.
Yeah, just quickly, I think like a lot of people, the administration didn't take anti-Semitism as seriously until things started happening in town and they realized that it was a legitimate issue for students. I have a feeling that it's only because of the large increase in anti-Semitic incidences that the administration has become so willing and able to help the Jewish community. I think there is a big problem, like Lillian said, about things going underreported. However, given the magnitude of the issues that have been happening to students, like having their mezuzot torn down and burned, things that have been like recorded on camera, given the magnitude of some of them, I think it put the administration in a place where it had to respond. I wish it hadn't happened that way. I wish they would have been more open to responding earlier on. But I think it kind of sets a fire under them to hopefully deal with Jewish related issue, anti-Semitic issues and other minority related issues.
Yeah, and I briefly just wanted to jump into and just say, again, like how some of the panelists have stated, is that there are processes that where bias reporting does happen and can happen. But oftentimes those reports are kind of overlooked, or they're just brushed up under the rug. And I think it's important to remember kind of like higher ed overall is founded up on capitalism. So if you have a faculty that is saying hateful things or that's doing hateful things, but yet they are the same faculty that brings millions of dollars in grants to the school, then the school definitely doesn't want to get rid of that faculty. So I think that it is important to also keep that up in mind too, is that, you know, we have to think about the system in which like higher which higher ed operates, and it is in fact capitalism. And that's why that these things do keep happening, is because having profit is way more important than having better student well-being. And that is very unfortunate, but it is a reality that does happen.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of this is kind of coming out after the stabbing last Wednesday. We're kind of seeing like this process of the university responding and releasing statements, whether, I mean, in my personal opinion, a little too slowly. Like, how does this process work, and how does IU provide support to students that need it in the Asian community as quickly as possible after something like this happens? So I think like it's great to be so public about it and kind of release that you're in support of this and things like that. But I think the like follow-up needs a lot of work, because I've talked to a lot of students that are struggling with the fact that they feel like they're not being seen and they're not being heard, and they have all of these concerns about their safety, but they don't feel like the university is specifically supporting them in the ways that they're asking. So whether that's having more outreach with Asian students and seeing the particular needs that need to be met, putting that more on higher ups that have more power and more say, rather than just the Asian Culture Center that like is completely overrun right now, and just really, really overwhelmed with the amount of messages that we're getting and reports and things like that. And I definitely think the bias reporting too is a big part of that. So going forward, like, how is the university going to support the bias reporting and support the Asian community after things like this kind of fizzle away? So like, how do we keep that support up in the inner time, you know, when there's not this horrible, tragic thing that has just happened? Like, how do we continue that support to each of these communities, like, all the time? So.
Yes, thank you so much. I think there's an ongoing conversation to have. I think that goes also beyond what really authorities can do, because we really need to talk about this together. Elisha, you had your hands up. Do you want to say a last word?
Yeah, I'd like to. I just want to respond quickly to one of the questions in the comments about how exactly do communities face hate speech online. I would direct you mainly towards social media, Twitter, TikTok, Yik Yak. They are a cesspool of racial hate, of anti-Semitism, of really any bias you could ask for. I have screenshots that I'm not going to share, but last year there was an incident where the Jewish fraternities were verbally trashed online, I think we have 5 Jewish fraternities here on campus. The claim was made that all of the students in the fraternities were rapists. They should all be put in the gas chambers. They should all be killed. That they've been doing horrible, terrible things, and that only the Jewish fraternities are to blame, of course. None of the other fraternities have done any wrong, and just, things like this. And the same thing can be said of hate against all the other minorities. It's very present online on social media. Yeah, I think our work at ISCA could definitely speak to that.
Thank you so much, all of you. You've been a great panel. That was very interesting to me, and I have learned again from you, and I hope that we can continue this conversation. Deja has made a suggestion in that sense. I hope we can follow up with that. There were others who had made some comments about who we can also contact. Thank you so much. And Xena had a very good question. Okay, how does that then work out into online hate speech? And this is the focus of our next hour, but the next hour will not be public anymore. That is only for the students who are in this workshop on the hackathon and datathon competition. We will talk about these, what we have observed, all these stereotypes. Some of them came up already that are specifically targeting specific minorities. But I just want to thank you all again for joining us here, and I really hope that we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.